We're talking about stable coins again. This time, there's speculation that China might be getting into this game with Yuan. I was skeptical when I first started reading about this because if you think about the value of stable coins, it's when the currency is brought to various different chains. When Tether started this game, and we were mostly on Ethereum. Most of the volume was there. I mean, it was pretty substantially there. Tether brought a way to trade down from whatever madness you were doing, whether it be NFTs or speculating on ETH or whatever was happening there in the world of DeFi. You had something to trade down to, so you could round trip this and you could do various things. Then it was taken to a variety of different chains, and we had other players coming in here as it became obvious that the stable coins were making these guys piles of money without having to do much other than just accrete capital, dump it into treasuries or reverse repo and make a ton of money. So this speculation that China is going to get into this particular game with the yuan doesn't make a ton of sense to me, especially as some of the reporting that I'm seeing says that they're not going to go do it on the popular chains where people are doing these things. So I don't really understand this for a variety of reasons, because the yuan already has a digital representation that China's been goofing around with. And I don't understand how this could possibly be pulled off if you don't go play in the sandboxes where trading is actually occurring so that you can dump a whole bunch of capital or whatever into treasuries. So let's have a discussion about this. I want to understand where you're coming from, Lucas, because I don't see this as being a top priority for China. And I'd be surprised if we see this actually occurring where in the world of crypto, you have a lot of users actually doing a lot of trading.
Okay, I think there might be two reasons that we can expect China to be moving in this direction. Now, one of them has to do with their relationship with BRICS, the relationship and the understanding of the dollar as the use of as the world's currency, and ways that they are fighting against that. So, China, if they are, if they, well, let me back up before I jump into China. One, there's been a lot of talks in the history of the BRICS, in that whole concept that they were going to try to replace the dollar. Now, we've heard from China and Russia and the various countries of the BRICS that they're not going to try to replace the dollar. And I think we should believe them and take their word for that, for reasons like, a group of countries coming together to create a common currency. They might have very different goals for who that currency is going to benefit the most, how it's to be created, who's going to control it. And the I in BRICS is not for Iran, but for India. And India recently, the foreign minister for India, when asked about BRICS, he said this is China's. BRICS is a China thing. He said India just plays along because they're our neighbor. We want to get along, and Russia is also interested in it, but this is a China thing, and India is very much interested in maintaining our relationship with the United States. Now, that could have been a lot of doublespeak, but it speaks to the wariness of the other countries who are joining BRICS as to are they jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire? They're going to keep their options open as much as possible. So understanding that, and then thinking about the control that China has exerted on the yuan, to keep it in their country and to avoid massive inflation of the amount.
Wait, let's jump into that for a second. If the Chinese have this desire to keep the yuan inside of China, why would they then turn around and do this weird dance to try to make what is already a digital currency available on something weird like Ant Chain or whatever is referenced in this X thread and also in this Financial Times article? It seems odd that this would be something that is being talked about by China in any serious way if they have this desire to have these capital controls. Like, wouldn't the first thing that they would do would be to relax those capital controls so that it can be widely traded, and then to try to collateralize it onto various chains where the users are? Because I'm going to keep saying that the only way that these stablecoins make sense is if they're on a chain where there's actual usage. So they would have to put the Yuan onto Solana or onto ETH, because that's where people are doing things. To put it onto some crumbum chain like ant chain that nobody's using and that hardly anybody's ever even heard of, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't understand what's being proposed here. And I could only find that this one guy was talking about this or even advocating for it. Yeah, okay, but anyway, keep going.
Well, for starters, Ant Chain is owned by Alibaba, and Alibaba owns WeChat. So their ability to immediately have millions of people using that chain is, I mean, that chain could be integrated into their existing app, and all of those customers who already use that are all of a sudden using that chain.
WeChat is a Chinese controlled thing. They want to have a digital yuan, they can just integrate the digital yuan.
Okay, but here's where again, if they're concerned about the inflation of the yuan, they are interested in keeping some sort of centralized control. Then if you think about the stablecoin as a layer of decentralization, a layer of partial reserve that skips.
No, there's no decentralization to a stable coin. This is as centralized as it can possibly get.
Well,
this requires a centralized custodian, especially if you're going to have one-to-one backing. I mean, you have to have a tether or a circle, and their job is to act as a custodian. It is the antithesis of decentralization. The only kind of decentralized stablecoin you can possibly have is if you're doing something like MakerDAO or CircuitDAO, and that is.
Okay, you're thinking in terms of the backing of the stablecoin. I'm thinking in terms of the use. So you can keep the yuan in the country, and then you can have stablecoins that are used outside of the borders. That's where I thought they might find this interesting.
But WeChat is primarily used inside the borders of China. This is why this doesn't make any sense.
What about Redbook?
I'm missing Red. What's the thought around Redbook? Go ahead.
Oh well, how many American users and Western users picked up Redbook in the wake of the United States attack on TikTok? So what I'm saying is, like, WeChat could be picked up by people outside of China, and if there were stablecoins that they're allowed to use that are based on the yuan, they're not using the yuan, but instead they're using stablecoins, and they have been integrated into the Chinese monetary system.
But the stablecoin only makes sense to bring it to a chain that is already has a user base, and you want that currency traded on that chain. To bring a stable coin into a closed ecosystem that is controlled by centralized entities, and to do so with a centralized blockchain technology, it's the most backward thing possible, and it doesn't add anything to the mix from the perspective of enabling the use of the yuan inside of an app like WeChat. You could just use the digital yuan. Like, the reason this happened, the purpose for stablecoins was to bring a representation of a currency which didn't exist to a chain that already had users. Like, that was the point of it, and to have a centralized custodian. I mean, the fact that the US got interested in this after they started to see a massive amount of ability to dump treasuries and to float the dollar, I think was a side effect of what ended up happening with the growth of crypto. But like, if you are going to use this primarily in these walled gardens that are centrally controlled, it's not going to do any of the things that are happening with the dollarization of stablecoins.
So
maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I'm got a too naive of a take on this, but I'm not getting it at the outset here. And what you just described didn't help me. So maybe keep going, and I'll see if I can get it.
Well, I just think that stable coins are attractive from if we're not thinking of them as an alternative to the banking system, or crypto as an alternative to the banking system, stable coins become compartmentalized currencies that are built on top of the country's current system, and that gives them a lot of flexibility with what they can do. And if there's a run on a stable coin, and there's 100 stable coins that are built on the yuan, or 100 stable coins that are built on the dollar, that can protect that base currency from that run. And that can also, again, I think that if you have stable coins and you're opening up or encouraging the use of those in other countries, or with people outside of your country, then it's a nice mixture of paper on paper, but paper that's used for that has a broader area of use, or more people that are allowed to use it, and that is it gives them more flexibility with their currency. And again, going back to the I mean, if you think about it, this is what the United States did with gold and the dollar. The dollar was a stable coin that was based on gold. And then we took that dollar and we made euro dollars, and we made other dollars around the world. And so,
I mean, I love the analogies, but I think it starts to break down when we just lose sight of what the definitions mean. I maybe am getting hung up on the definition here. Is like a stable coin means something in the world of blockchains and cryptocurrencies, and canonically what it means is that you have a centralized entity that's backing the token that they're creating one to one, and it has redemption to the underlying fiat asset. And
so
that
and I think it is, your adherence to that traditional understanding of stablecoins is maybe where we aren't seeing eye to eye here, because I don't know that this notion of one to one is going to hold. And
well, even if the one to one doesn't hold, I'm not sure what that would mean. You still, within the world of transparent blockchains, the ability to count up the number of tokens. So if you're going to do some kind of fractional reserving, I don't see why it would trade one to one. I mean, it either has a redemption or it doesn't. I mean, that's typically what gives something its peg to the underlying asset.
I would imagine that people are going to say, as long as it's disclosed and I know what I'm getting into, I don't care. And again, but
it either has a redemption or it doesn't. I mean, that's what gives something its value. I mean, you can trade it and say that it's something else, but usually when that redemption is lost, or the ability to trade it for the underlying asset is gone, the markets will react quickly, swiftly, and not kindly when that occurs. And that's when the stable coin will lose its peg, will precipitously drop in value, and then there will be the equivalent of a bank run, where people run to swap that for something else. And as the sell pressure mounts and there's no redemption capability, then it drops to zero.
So all likely to happen in the future, but again, it does not take away this advent of possibility for them to be again creating paper to pass around outside of China that's based on paper inside of China, and woe betide those who are taken advantage of by political intrigue or whatever may happen with that system. But it still gives them a mirror to reflect and to make a currency that's based on the yuan without sending the yuan outside of their country. And I think this is how they have to be looking at it.
But it only makes sense if they go play in the sandboxes in the token spaces where it means something. If you do this in a centralized place, and you're essentially hiding the blockchain.
Well,
And it
and I
only
don't.
works.
So great point, and who knows? But one, how many people are using USDC? How many people are in crypto around the world? What is the population of China? And so they might be looking at it with how attractive this could be to a much a larger segment of the population of not just China but Asia and the world population. So
If you're going to embrace more users, then that you've got to do it where they live. This is where I keep getting tripped up on this, because if we say stablecoin, it implies that you're on some kind of a blockchain, and usually that you're on a blockchain that's pre-existing, and you're chasing that chain and that users and the liquidity there. If you do this in the way you're describing, I just don't even see how it fits the definition of stablecoin. It really just means the expansion of the use of digital yuan, which I could definitely see China relaxing their capital controls and just doing that.
Again, when you're talking about stable coins, I think you have a very I don't think that you see it the way that they see it. I think what they're interested in is the notion of a currency, of a digital currency backed by another digital currency.
Well, and I think that's maybe where we're seeing eye to eye, and we're just calling it something different. And I think it's where calling this a stable coin is somewhat disingenuous, because a digital currency does not mean that it's a stable coin, because that means that you are maintaining a peg to some other thing that fundamentally isn't doing the digital thing that you want it to do. And I think that that's why these things even started to exist. So this is where the definition of this, I think, really gets hairy, and even calling it a stable coin is disingenuous if you're gonna describe it the way that you are.
I'm trying to think of an alternative name, but none jumps to mind. But essentially, I again, what I think they find attractive is a digital coin, a digital currency that is based on or reflects in some algorithmic way. Maybe this goes back to algorithmic currencies, because that could be a complex algorithm that but in some way based on their currency. So, but there's something else that so one, I think that China's interest in being able to project or to have a currency that is again based on but not the same as their people's currency, the people of China's currency. I think they're very interested in that whenever they look at how the United States has exerted influence over the world since World War II. But there's also something else that I thought interesting. So I was listening to dear old Tucker Carlson, who I still can't believe what a pivot he's done. He's had some real great guests on recently. But one that I found very interesting was Richard Werner. And Richard Werner is an economist who lived in Japan during the stagflation and the quantitative easing periods of Japan. And he's been very interested in, maybe to sum up his views very broadly, he's very concerned about centralization of monetary systems, central banks, and how central banks operate and what the problems of central banks are. Now, I'm more disposed to the ideas of Michael Hudson, who talks a lot about who the onus of debt is on when it comes to financialization and constructing monetary systems. And Werner doesn't really address who is on the hook for paying debts, the lender or the borrower. And so but I thought his points with regards and his concerns with centralization were very interesting. And in his conversation with Tucker, he lays out an expectation for a world that's emerging into a much more decentralized banking era. And you know, I love to go back to World War, I'm sorry, the Civil War in the United States, and talk about the problems that occurred whenever we federalized, centralized, nationalized, whatever word that we want to use it, whenever we destroyed the regional banks and the state banks in the United States, and the effects those had on favoring larger and institutions and players that existed near the hub of that banking system. First New York City, and now Washington, D.C. So when I think too of the possibility of stablecoins as a reflection of banking systems, and again setting a layer of decentralization that relies on the centralized layer, I think that China might. I'm sure the Chinese are very aware of Michael Hudson, very aware of Richard Werner, who wrote such influential books in Japan, and have thought about the problems of centralized banking, and the solutions that having many small banks to give loans instead of one large bank to give out loans and expect some trickle down of that large institution to work. I'm sure they've thought about that, and so again, I think we should have an expectation that they're thinking about not just one layered of stablecoin, but of many, and how that might again, how that might isolate the effects on their broader centralized currency when it comes to runs on the bank, and how this could also begin to be a digital version of a decentralized banking system.
In reading through some of the source material as I dug through the X thread and then later the Financial Times article and some of the other things, I got down to the G20 report, which seems to be the basis of some of where this is coming from on cross-border payments. And if this is tied to BRICS, which I think there's been some resistance to because it's too China heavy, is that fair to say that what's happening with BRICS in a lot of ways is viewed as extremely China heavy, and therefore
I mean, that's what India said, and I think there's some truth to that. But I thought also, one, India is a long geopolitical rival of China, and I thought that it was overstated. But I do think that you know, imagine stablecoins that are based not like a stablecoin that is based not just on one country's currency, but of two countries' currencies. And so this is where I think that it could be getting more interesting too at the national level for cross-border payments.
Yeah, I definitely think we're going to need a different word to use for what you're describing, because even this part is now starting to. I'm curious how this would actually play out in practice. To have two currencies, these two currencies are going to trade on the international markets in the way that they normally do. We've had currencies traded internationally for as long as people have had a need for a currency in particular contracts, or the ability to make payments to people who live within a particular region or whatever. So now if we had some sort of an instrument that had multiple different currencies within it, now you've got this basket. And what does that mean for the basket of currencies to trade in a stable way? I mean, that would mean that they would have to carry the value of both of those in some combined fashion while both of these things are trading on an international level and even against each other. That to me now, I think, crosses into something that I really don't think makes sense to call it a stable coin. We're starting to use a word here to mean too many different things. And I think if it just means tokenized assets, or if it means digital representations of things that exist in some other sense, well, I don't think that makes sense to call that a stable coin anymore.
I think you're right in that regard, and hopefully we hear I'll be thinking about the right word or what best describes it. Maybe algorithmic is correct, um, because the algorithm is going to be taking in, you know, is just a mathematical word for, or a word that describes the mathematical considerations that would be going for, you know, what values and volumes of the various currencies in the basket would be, and also the
Well,
time codes.
and I'd also say that over the last 5 years, every time an algorithmic stablecoin has been attempted, it's either lost its peg, died a horrible flaming death, or has been abandoned in favor of centralized custodian stablecoins. So we just really haven't had anything that even succeeded, except for maybe MakerDAO. But I think they again largely abandoned this in favor of doing it in a different way. So the most popular way to do a token like this is to do it in a one-to-one backing and then have a redemptive capacity to it. I I don't know again that algorithmic means something here except for it could be tried again, but we haven't seen a lot of successes in the experiments with these style of tokens or currencies
So,
whenever it's been tried.
well, and the historical expectation, or our expectation from the the history of of um, of financial instruments that are based on baskets of currencies, and I'm thinking specifically about the IMF and the World Bank. We've talked about the special voting rights. You know, part of the solution after the United States defaulted on its promise to pay the other countries in the world who were using the dollar, the paper stablecoin based on gold. Part of the solution coming out of that was to turn towards a basket of currencies. And so the currencies in the currencies in that the basket of currencies that established the special voting rights in the World Bank today are supposed to be according to the top 5 largest economies in the world. And that was the rule that they adhered to, until China and Asian countries, economies began to grow more quickly than they expected. And after that happened, they just abandoned that rule and have kept the same currencies for the last several years and have not reevaluated, who gets the what the balances of special voting rights are in the IMF and the World Bank. So, no surprise, uh, no surprise that whenever you're relying on a basket of currencies, the loser, or the more devalued party, in that basket are going to want to cheat, but um, they still provide, they're still attractive in creating a currency based on multiple parties. So,
And what I'm talking about here is in the world of crypto when we've seen algorithmic stable coins. And this is where in crypto, being a pure crypto play, where you have a basket of whatever types of crypto assets and then trying to trade that basket of assets so that it maintains a value for that basket one to one with some underlying other thing. This was, what many algorithmic stable coins attempted to do. Frax Finance was one of the last big players who then abandoned that idea because a lot of these cryptos were trading too correlated. It was too hard to keep it pegged to a dollar when almost everything goes up or down at the same time. The idea is that you would be like rebalancing a portfolio of assets to make it so that it stays at one. You have some things that go up, some things that go down. But I think what they found was a lot of times is that the markets were so correlated, everything would either rip or go down simultaneously, that there is no concept of having a basket of assets that can be individually traded in some way that allows you to maintain its peg, because everything's either ripping and the value of everything is over the dollar, or everything is tanking and it's under the value of $1. So they just said, well, we really can't pull this off, and abandoned it and decided to go the Tether route, which is one-to-one collateralized with the centralized component and a redemption. So this to me is the canonical definition of stablecoin, and any attempt to redefine it, I think we're better off using a different word and thinking about it in a different way, because in the world of crypto, I think we've got a pretty firm definition for what stablecoin means. And I think even when China is talking about this, they're talking about something slightly different unless they're talking about this. So I think it's pretty well known. And so, until I see more substantive things that say that China is actually going to go play in these particular sandboxes, whether it be, in ETH or Solana, or, maybe trying to make some kind of a thing on Bitcoin, it shouldn't be called a stable coin. And we'll see what they do with the enhancement or the attempt to have the yuan more broadly traded in the world as a currency that people want to use, maybe as a competitor to the dollar.
Well, I don't think we're going to see China jumping on ETH, Solana, or even Bitcoin ever. So, and I could be wrong there, at least with Bitcoin, but I'm fairly certain that ETH and Solana are out. And any other proof of stake coin that's based that's controlled by parties controlled by the United States or located in the United States. So, but I did think this was interesting. I wonder what we will see. Other countries' reaction to the United States Stable Genius Act and the adoption of stable coins and the broader move in that direction. So maybe we'll see more here. Maybe someday Ant Chain will be words on everybody's lips as opposed to Ethereum or Solana. We'll see. But a fun discussion. I don't think I have much more to add.
All right. We'll keep an eye on it. We'll see what China does with this, especially with their usage of the word stablecoin. Maybe they'll adopt something else per our prodding. And we'll see you next time on FOMO.